All right, good morning. I know I've said that a couple times, but thank you again. If you were not in the room a couple minutes ago, my name is Laura Kroger. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategic Initiatives in the Office of Research and Innovation, but I'm also the Communication Manager and Director for Research Support Council, so you get a lot of emails from me and my team. Thank you, everybody, for registering, but also showing up today. We initially typically have these events on a Tuesday, and it was Wellness Day tomorrow. So we moved the event to the Monday and then didn't think about the Super Bowl. So very much appreciate everybody being willing to come. We did feed you. Hopefully that was helpful after your late night watching the game. But I very much appreciate everyone still coming, being here with us today. We have a lot of exciting things to share with you, and I really want today to be a place for you to meet some of the colleagues you've maybe never met in person or haven't seen in a while, but really start making connections, across colleges and divisions and departments. So I really do encourage you to talk with those around you and meet people in the room. It's always better. I always think having more connections at the university are just going to make your job and your life easier, and it's great to have people that are working through similar tasks on a day-to-day basis as you are. So this is your opportunity to meet those people and see what's working for them, what's not, and how we can help each other. So I do encourage you to continue to talk to people across the room throughout the day and to meet your central office directors and your RSC executive members and our leadership here as well. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to start us off by asking our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mladen Vogt, to come to the stage and just give you all a special welcome. So Dr. Vogt.
Good morning. Oh, come on. Good morning. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to have you here, and also people online. And I want to wish all of you a good morning again. We seem to be doing that today often. And I'm very pleased to see particularly those that are here in person, because it has been a while since I saw some of you. NC State research is doing really well, touch wood. I don't want to jinx us, but in terms of incoming funds, in terms of proposals, it also increased the volume of work, and and we all feel it, I'm quite sure. And so I do want to thank you for what you do, because what you do really is the key element of the research being operational and working as it does. And one thing that I think we should all appreciate is that we need to be proactive in some of these things to avoid potentially blind alleys. But so far we have been doing very well. So I do want to thank you, and I hope today you're going to have an opportunity to meet people you haven't met before, to make contact with central office people if you haven't seen them before, and to have a really productive day. So thank you again. And I'm going to ask Missy to start us off on the main course. So see you.
Good morning. I'm Missy Thomas. I'm chair of the Research Support Council Executive Committee. I'm also director of Research and Center Administration in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So I also would like to welcome you here today. We've got some great training and updates for you. And I'd like to remind you that even though it's a big room, you probably don't want to talk in front of anybody, just like I don't want to talk in front of you. If you have questions, raise your hand. We learn by the questions we all have, so feel free to do that. We'd also like to take time during the kickoff meeting to welcome new members. So if you've joined our group anytime between February of 2023 and today, if you'd please stand. Thank you. We're happy you're a part of our group. There are a lot of us. We've got people online who couldn't be here in person today, but a lot of resources for you, so make use of us. If you have questions, reach out to people. We can help. And at the end of today's meeting, if you'll go to the registration table, there's a little gift for the new members. We'd also like to acknowledge our new certified research administrators to help encourage our new members to become CRAs and congratulate any new CRAs that we have in the crowd today. I'd like to welcome Sherry Settle to the stage for a special message.
Thank you, Missy, and good morning, everyone. It's good to see at least some of you in person. I appreciated Laura talking about the scheduling. Is anybody else nursing? Oh, didn't mean to do that. All right, don't know. I'll just have to be there. Is anybody else nursing a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover today? Maybe just a little bit? Does clumsy stuff like this? Yeah, but it's okay. I appreciate all of you being here. You're here, I'm here. People with lesser constitutions are out there online, but yeah, still kind of here. It's an honor to be able to speak a little bit at the invitation of the RSC Executive Committee about a little part of the history of the professionalization of this field of what we do in research administration from my own personal observation. I was fortunate, by pure accident, to be witness to some early conversations and something that proved to be very important in our field, and that's the credential, the Certified Research Administrator credential. And it seems kind of obvious now that this is a field that would have something like that, but it hasn't always been so. And for a little bit of context, well, looking around a little, people are paying attention, but I'll ask you to kind of top off your coffee if you need to. Put down your cell phones, because we didn't have those when I started in research administration, and join me in a short little trip in the Wayback Machine. And for some context, when I started down this path myself in a career in research administration, I had just arrived in Blacksburg, Virginia, home of Virginia Tech, and it was 1992. Just do the math in your head. You don't have to blurt anything out, particularly if you get it wrong. Let's not do that. And I took this job in what would be a college research office, if we'd even had that nomenclature, in the College of Veterinary Medicine at Virginia Tech. And after being there just a few months and trying to figure out what this job was, I got an invitation to go to the organizational meeting of the Virginia chapter of the Society of Research Administrators. There was no SRA International, it was barely an SRA National, but there was an organization for people who did this stuff. Who knew? So off I went. The registration was less than $50. It was hosted by UVA in Charlottesville, so I could stay with friends. So it fit my office budget. Some things haven't changed a whole lot. And it was a pretty interesting day as far as business meetings can be. They talked about the purpose of the national organization and its function and what the Virginia chapter would be and its function. And people were nominated for offices and duly elected. And none of that was very interesting, really. But what was interesting was a coffee break. And we weren't all carrying these things around then, so if you had a coffee break, you actually had to go talk to people. And I didn't drink coffee, so I really was at a loose end on this. But I looked around, and there was one fairly lively discussion. It had maybe 10 or 12 people, so you could kind of hide in a group. And in that little cluster of research administrators, as it turned out we were, a gentleman named Chuck Termside, who I later find out was sort of a founding father in our profession, was holding forth about the idea of a credential, of a certification for research administrators. And his little group of mostly, more seasoned professionals, old white guys, were kind of listening and looking a little skeptical and say, you mean like an exam? Well, yeah, there would be an exam. I'm really not so sure about this. And as our break time rolled down, I remember one seasoned professional particularly saying, Chuck, I just don't see it. I don't see taking an exam at this point in my career, and this isn't something I'd expect my staff to do. And Chuck just smiled and said, called him by name, don't worry, the exam would just be what you already know from doing the job. Like, what you already know? What kind of a certification is what somebody already knows? That doesn't sound right. But I didn't think much more about it because the idea didn't seem to have a lot of support, and I didn't plan on being in this profession for very long. Turns out I was wrong on both counts. So my next touch with SRA was the next year when I came south of the border to a North Carolina chapter SRA meeting, was hosted by UNC Charlotte, and this looked more like the meetings we have now, right? There were sessions, there was an agenda, what some of you have been to with NCSRA probably. And there was a business meeting. It was over a working meal, as they tend to be. And after the business of the officers and the financial report and where the next meeting was going to be and all that stuff, there was one discussion topic. And it was this idea of a credential again. But this was a very different conversation because it wasn't 10 old guys. It was 100 or so people who were more like me. I mean, these were people whose jobs were probably labeled as accountants or administrative assistants or something clerical, even though what they did every day didn't look like what anybody else with those titles did. This was a specialized area. And that conversation was very different because this community was thinking about what that meant for them in their future. And very different sense of that group. If we were going to do this, if there was going to be a certification and an exam, then it had to be comprehensive, and it had to be rigorous, and it had to mean something, because this is a portable thing we're going to take with us that has to signify that we know something that's specialized and that's important. Not only was this a richer conversation, it was a little more urgent, because the Research Administration, the RAC, was formed in 1993. So the time was then, and even though it had not given out its first CRA credential yet, it would become all of those things, comprehensive and rigorous and meaningful. And I look back on this later and wondered if Chuck Chermside had really been serious when he told his older colleagues that the exam's just what you know. And I guess that could be true. It really was a different kind of work then in many ways. I mean, we were submitting proposals with an original +5 photocopies. We were having FedEx watching parties when your whole package of appendices and stuff didn't fit in the Dropbox. Other things hadn't happened yet. The Public Health Service had not yet published its first rule on conflict of interest. So a whole sector of what we're concerned about didn't exist yet. A HIPAA was a thing you saw at the zoo. So it was a very different time, a simpler time, but it was still a specialized field. So maybe it was true, and maybe he was just trying to get some of the older colleagues on board. And I think that might have been it. And the reason I think that is, well, the CRA did eventually grandfather a very few people into the credential based on their careers in the field, but not many. And Chuck himself, before he left us in 2006, did a stint as the executive director of the RAC. And he had an opportunity to comment on the Res Admin listserv. I'll bet some of you are on that still a pretty good resource, about what that credential was. And Chuck talked about the CRA as the journeyman credential in our guild. And I kind of like that language. It's kind of old school, but a little charming. And as he talked about this, answering some questions about why the RAC existed and why the CRA was how it was, he said the following. Now remember, our profession is broad. No one can be highly expert across the board. But to be a CRA, one has to know at least something of other specialties within the field. So a passing score on the CRA exam cannot be achieved by someone whose entire area of knowledge is tightly focused. RAC does not believe the CRA status is deserved by someone who is overly narrow. As I said, the goal is a journeyman, someone who can be dropped into the profession anywhere and function adequately with only a little learning of the peculiarities of the explicit environment and will have the background to become good in short order. It's a pretty high bar. And as our field has become more complex and research administration moves faster and faster, and there's more and more that you have to know, and the consequences of error are even greater, it was really prescient, I think, of our founding fathers in the field to set up this process and create this credential that is broad, that is comprehensive, and that means something. Now, specialization is still a thing, and as the complexity grows, it's even more of a thing. So even the RAC has expanded into some specialty certifications for pre-award research administration and financial research administration. That exam recently passed by our own Lena Cathuria in contracts and grants. And all of these are valuable credentials. But the CRA itself still stands as a gold standard. And this is why I've been really interested in watching the evolution of the CRA as a hallmark for expertise in our field and why I've encouraged those I've worked with at the last several universities to pursue it. So all of that said, if you hold a CRA, stand up, please, and be recognized for your investment in both your own career and in our field. If you are studying for the CRA, stand up. Thank you. And you've seen your community, the people who have been there and done that, and are here as resources for you. If it looks like it's hard, actually is hard. It's supposed to be hard, but it's significant. And it's a significant investment in a career and in a field that I didn't plan to spend X number of years in, but I'm very grateful I've been able to do so, because where else can you make the kind of contribution and the kind of impact to solving the world's problems that we make as research administrators? Thank you all. Thank you for being here. And if you're pursuing the CRA, good luck in the exam.
Thank you, Sherry. I always enjoy hearing you talk about this. Next, I'm going to turn things over to Laura Kroger and her team. We've got an exciting and competitive, I've heard, icebreaker for us today.
Thank you, Missy. So yes, as Missy noted, this is a somewhat competitive icebreaker we have for you. So we're going to get your adrenaline going, get juices flowing, get that coffee into your system. And maybe this does tie into the Super Bowl. You're feeling that competitive edge from last night. It was a great game, right? It went into overtime. So today, on your tables, with the group at your table, you're going to be playing what's called Human Hungry Hippos. So I know some of my research and innovation folks have done this before, and they might have an edge. Maybe they'll give you some pointers. But you'll see solo cups at the end of your table. Those are going to become your hands. So I want you to take 2 solo cups a person and slip your hands into them. I should have brought an example up, but go ahead and put your hands in them so you're sticking them up top. You also see a pile of candy in front of you in the middle of the table, right? So what you'll want to do is maybe clear your drinks, clear a little bit of that space. I'm going to give, oh, I need my phone. I'll have to go get that in a second. We're going to end up doing a couple of rounds of 30-second Hungry Hippos. You are not allowed, thank you, to use your hands. You have to use your hands with the solo cups to try to pick up and move the candy to a section in front of you, and that becomes your candy stash, your pile that you won in that game. So, everyone put your hands up with your cups. Go ahead and put those up to show me that your table is ready. We've got a couple more I still need to do. Sherry's cheating. Got to put your hands in the cups. Still a couple more. I'm still waiting for a couple tables to show me you're ready. If your table's ready, put your hands up with your cups and your hands in your cups. All right. We're going to do a round of 30 seconds, so you get a little feel for this, all right? And again, we will do it a couple times, so maybe you'll find new strategies throughout these couple of rounds. So on my mark, get set, go. Ten seconds already gone. There's one more. Yeah, you're technically supposed to pick up, but however you do it. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. All right. So who was the winner at each table, meaning who got the most candy in front of them? Raise your cup. All right. So now that you kind of get an idea of maybe how to pick up candy or how your colleagues might be cheating a little bit to grab their own candy, go ahead and push your pile of candy back to the middle of your table. We're going to do another round. Maybe there's a particular candy that you really, really want from that pile that you need to realize now that you're going to need to go for first? All right. Still see some people pushing candy. All right, we're going to do another 30-second round. All right. Put your cups up if you're ready. All right, on my mark, get set, go. Much more aggressive this round. Ten seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. I definitely saw more aggressive gameplay that time. We had maybe some specialty items people were going for. Are you all satisfied with the pile you have in front of you, or do you want to try one more time? I guess put your cups up if you want to do one more time. If your table wants to keep your piles that you keep for yourself, you can keep that. But we might have a couple of tables that realize somebody wants a different type of candy in front of them. So we'll do one more of pushing candy in the middle, if your table's interested in doing that. Cool. I didn't, because I had to come up here, so I didn't message you. Sorry. It's fine. Let's do our last round here. So go ahead and put your cups up if you're ready. All right. On your marks, get set, go. Fifteen seconds. Oops. Shoot. Uh-oh. 10. Oh, shoot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And stop. All right. So, did everyone enjoy yourself? Do you feel like you were able to get your frustration from your team losing last night out of your system? You have now beaten some of your colleagues instead. But thank you for enjoying our game, playing our game. I hope you do share some of the treats with your colleagues if there is one that in particular that somebody likes. You have some Valentine's Day themed candy on there as well, but some general candy as well. So thank you all for playing our icebreaker. We're doing a little change up on our agenda. Sorry, that's in front of you, that we're actually going to do our central office updates first. So you get to meet each of our central office directors and put a face to the name. And then we will turn into our hot topics and then the last agenda item of the training with our training team. So I will probably at this point push things back over to Missy and ask her to come up. And I'm going to try to... Who's a Mac user that can tell me very quickly how to make this full screen? Because I feel like I should just have to double check. This guy? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to turn things over to Missy to just introduce each of our central office directors, and we're going to rotate between all of them. I was going to do that with the hot topics. We're going to do central office first.
All right, next we have central office updates. I'll ask each director to give a short overview of your responsibilities for our new members. And we are going to start with Mary Millsaps, our Director of Research Compliance.
Hi. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Mary Duarte Millsaps. I am the Director of Research Compliance, which is a unit within Sparks. So we're very lucky to have Sherry as our AVC. Within Research Compliance, there is multiple units, the IACUC, the IRB, the Conflicts of Interest Office, our Export Control Office, and who am I forgetting? Oh, our fearless facility security officer who handles our classified program. If you don't remember those things, we have a great website. I often find it by just Googling research security and CSU. All of our offices' pages are there, and it links to our directory. Also links to some really great definitions, because when you're dealing in the regulatory space, often specific words mean specific things. So don't hesitate to use that when you're evaluating a BAA or a request for proposal documentation, or you're trying to answer a question for your faculty member. That's a resource to you. And you are one of the intended audiences. So if there's something, a common question that you're often getting from your faculty, and the answer is not there, we just recently updated our website as it relates to conflicts of interest due to some feedback we received from the College of Vet Med. So it really is intended to be a resource for you and your faculty, so please make sure you're getting us that feedback. Couple of updates within our office. We've recently added 2 new people. David McSweeney, who's actually in the room here. He just recently joined our export control team under Kristen Bloomquist as an export control administrator. We were arguing over the title, but we like administrator, right? We can agree to that one. David and Kristen work to evaluate when we've got contracts that have publication restrictions, or we have faculty who need to ship material or equipment overseas, or they want to work with a foreign entity. We will screen them. So they're very much engaged, especially with your internationally minded faculty, and they're a resource to you as well. In our IACUC team, she's not in the room right now, but she's certainly a wonderful, valued addition to our IACUC team is Mallory McKinley. And no, we don't just hire people that have a start of the name Mick in their name. All comers can come. Mallory came to us from the College of Vet Med in the animal facilities, and so she comes with a great deal of knowledge as to the operational aspects of animal care and use. And I know Jennifer Dew, our director of IACUC, was really excited to have her join that team. I am going to take this opportunity to highlight a local opportunity that's coming up. The NC State and UNC Chapel Hill are co-hosting the Association of University Export Control Officers Conference here in Raleigh in May. And you might think to yourself, well, I'm not an export control officer. Why would I want to attend that? And I will just highlight that especially if you're working with internationally minded faculty, or you're working especially in college engineering, or with faculty who do direct defense-related research, or research that accept publication restrictions, it's not a bad idea for you to increase your knowledge in this space, and this is an opportunity for you to do that. The first day of the conference is workshops, and there will be a basic workshop that goes over kind of the intricacies of export control regulations and the sanction regulations. And so if you've got money in your budget for professional development and this is an area of interest to you, I encourage you, the registration should open this week. And so if you don't know how to get to it, you can certainly reach out to our export control team. Kristen Bloomquist can share that information with you. We are always looking for people within research compliance who have operational experience out in the departments and colleges. So this is a great way for you to increase your professional development and potentially even join our team, because the more people who have research administration experience from pre-award to post-award contracting that are a part of our team, it just grows our ability to work with the colleges and the departments. So on that note, I will turn it back over to Missy. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Justo Torres. Justo is our Director of Contracts and Grants.
Dramatic pause. Buenos dias, because I can't say good morning one more time. My name is Justo Torres. I'm the Director for Contracts and Grants. And before I talk to you about what Contracts and Grants is and does and the direction we're heading, I do want to point out one thing. I learned something today, and that's not all that common. Sherry and I started in the profession in the same year, 1992. I got a bald spot and she's got purple hair. So there's probably something going on to that. So if any of your faculty are into like hair research, maybe you could, poke them. So Contracts and Grants is responsible for post-award financial. We do billing, invoicing, drawdown, cash management. I've been meeting with auditors for the last 6 months, so I've got the speech pretty well down. We do effort reporting. We do closeout in partnership with you. Actually, I should say everything we do is in partnership with you because we can't do what we do without you. And unfortunately, you can't do what you do without us. So it kind of works both ways. So we do closeout, we do audit management, we do audit response, and we do effort reporting, obviously. And just to give you an idea of the direction we're heading, we've had 2 weeks of very good interviews. I know searching for people to fill vacancies is extremely difficult nowadays, but thankfully we've had very good pools lately, very recently. We're pleased about that. We are pleased to find candidates that are perfectly okay with a hybrid model and don't want to be completely remote. So I think in the very near future, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have all of our vacancies filled, and then we're going to grow. We're going to be putting some effort into developing the systems side of what we previously called systems and compliance. So we'll have a couple of positions that are responsible for making sure that the tools we have within the electronic systems that we all use work well, get enhanced, get updated, and very importantly, get tested when changes are made to make sure that when we roll things out to campus, everything is working as effectively as we need it to. And then on the other side of things, I haven't quite figured out what we're going to call this yet because in a conversation with Mary, I agreed to not call it compliance to cause any confusion around campus. So we're going to call it maybe financial integrity or maybe something that isn't compliance focused just to not cause any confusion. But we'll have a team that will not only continue to do, if you know Brad Prizer in my office and you work with Brad, he does all the audit coordinating for campus. It will not just expand on what Brad's role is, but it will also allow us to get a little bit more proactive and maybe visit some of your units and see what's going on before auditors come in to see what's going on, and then give your leadership at the college and the research level some feedback as to what we're finding that's working well and maybe what we're finding that could use some improvement. So just look forward to those changes in the near future. Thanks.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Kyle Mullaney. Kyle is our Director of Education and Training.
Hello, everyone. It is good to be here with you today. It's wonderful that in this new role, I'm serving you all and your colleagues at a much higher level. And in that regard, we're looking at what we can do for the following year. And since I am new in the role, those plans are coming together, maybe a little more slowly than I had hoped, but I think they're coming together in a way that's more full and addresses issues more fully. So over the next year, as the Director of Education and Training, we are looking at what training opportunities, what training plans we can bring to you on campus that will help us get a well-rounded understanding of research administration across the university. We're looking at plans for folks who are at, let's call it, more seasoned levels of research administration, how we can give you all opportunities to come in, learn new skills, or go out and bring back to us the wonderful things that you learn at various conferences across the world, or well, across the country most likely, that serve your particular interests. In terms of RED, we're looking at new ways that we can create resources that address different population groups. So most of you are research administrators, and that's wonderful. And we're really excited that with our release and rollout last August, about 200 or so members of the research administration community alone enrolled in courses for rollout. But we also understand that what we brought to you at rollout doesn't hit the full scope of what research administrators do on campus. And so in the next week or so, you're going to be seeing new resources pop up. For example, we have resources coming on one that calling, and it may change, but where on earth is it? And it's just a research that helps us figure out where particular data sets, particular things are across our various research administration systems. We have a resource that we just released last week on finding my PAM number. And so it lets you start off from 3 different standpoints at the very top of the page. You click the link, and it jumps you down to the section that's appropriate for the information you presently have. And finally, we have a whole set of FAQs related to this and others coming out, I think this week. That's what Matt and I are working on right now. We're also in the midst of recruiting for the Red Training Manager position. So if you know any folks who have been in training, who have been in process management that you really love in your personal lives, and you want to give them the opportunity to apply to work on a wonderful team with wonderful colleagues doing great work here at the university, send them our way. The job posting's available, but we'd be happy to interview those whom you care about deeply. Thank you all.
Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Marissa Clarkson, our Director of Sponsored Programs.
Just need to pull your slides up on a Mac. Come on. Oh, no. Well, I don't know what I'm doing on a Mac. Everyone can bear with me. Okay. Here you go.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you all for being here today in person and virtually. It's so nice to get back to a space where we're getting to see each other in person more often. My name is Marissa Clarkson, and I'm the Director of Sponsored Programs here at NC State. I lead a team of research administrators centrally on an operations team and on negotiations teams. So these are the individuals who are working tirelessly to make sure that all of those proposals that you all have put so much work into getting submitted are input into our systems, and that the awards that we're receiving are being processed, amendments are getting processed, negotiations are moving along, and you'll see later that there is a jump in how much research volume we've seen. So there's a lot of work to be done. For our updates, and Laura, this is, I think, actually like my central office update, so I don't know if you want me to jump into that right after this.
So central office updates first, we'll do the hot topic in the next.
Amazing. Okay. Okay, so we are hiring for a couple of positions in sponsored programs. One is a subaward negotiator. So many of you may have known Anne, who retired back in March. I guess it's almost been a year now. Is that right? Yeah. So, sorry, she was. If you knew Anne, she left a mark. I mean, she would sing at people's going away, like retirement parties, and she was a huge asset to our team. The team, after her retirement, really absorbed the sponsored, the subaward work that she had taken on, and so we're now hiring for that position. So if you or someone you know is interested, please feel free to reach out. Actually, Kevin, our assistant director for nonprofit federal negotiations, is the hiring manager. So if you have any questions, Kevin, raise your hand, and you can go see him. We're also hiring for a operations specialist. So that would be on our operations team with Stephanie and Monique, and they will be helping us with all things operations. I could not do the job I do without our ops team, who keeps me sane and keeps things moving along. So Stephanie and Monique, if you could just raise your hands and wave. Amazing. If you have any questions about that position, please feel free to approach either of them and ask any questions. In the last year, we were able to hire 2 contract negotiators who have been a wonderful asset in addition to our team. That is Nakia Wilson and Jeffrey Lakin, who I don't see in person here, but if y'all are joining us online, we're so glad that you joined our team and chose us, and we just are really thankful for the group that we have in sponsored programs. With that, I'll go ahead and start in on our updates. So as I mentioned, the volume of campus research has grown in the last year. The lighter blue is the proposals as of February 8th, 2023, and awards as of February 8th, 2023. The darker color is this year, fiscal year to date. So you can see, I'm sure you all feel it, but I just also want to validate that we are doing more work. There's more research coming through the pipe. So pat yourselves on the back. We're all doing a great job keeping things moving. The other thing that I want to talk about is the federal enforcement of technical report submission. So this is something that we've been seeing more and more with sponsors, federal sponsors, paying attention to those technical reports that principal investigators are responsible for submitting as a term and condition of their award. This last year, for a situation that really was not necessarily the principal investigator's fault in this case, but we got to go through the process of having been reported in SAM.gov for a delinquent report. And what that means is that every federal sponsor, whether that was direct or a pass-through entity, checks that responsibility and qualification section of SAM.gov to see if someone has been a bad performer. And they saw that we had this mark on our record, and they would not release funding to us as a university until we were able to clear that. So what we're seeing is that this is going to become more common. Federal sponsors are paying attention, and they will report the university for noncompliance. So what that can look like is the withholding of cash payments to NC State, the suspension or termination of the award, withholding of the administrative actions, even non-financial, so change in PI, no cost extension, those being withheld as well, not just from the project in question, but also from projects of the collaborators, even at other institutions. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the reporting of NC State for noncompliance in SAM.gov, which has real effects on our ability to receive funding as a university. So you may have received an email at the beginning of this month. This was our first month trying it out. Shout out to Stephanie for all of the good work that she did getting this report ready. We reached out to each of the college research offices and obtained the contacts that are responsible for reporting. What we've done is at the beginning of each month, Sponsored Programs is sending out an email that outlines these consequences of deliverables not being submitted and provides a listing of deliverables that we've been made aware of from sponsor systems or sponsor emails that are overdue and need to be submitted. And I say reports that we've been made aware of because not every sponsor system offers up that information easily, and the ones that we can pull it out of, we do. The ones that do send us email reminders, we incorporate those. We flag those projects so that they show up in this listing. So again, this started this month in February, and we'll continue to send that out monthly. The other update I have is NSF has released their Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide 24-1. This will be effective for all proposals submitted on or after May 20th of 2023 and all awards received for those proposals. A big part of the updates were clarifying definitions, including the malign foreign talent recruitment programs. It also made individuals who are participating in, I'm going to just say MFTRPs, short for malign foreign talent recruitment programs, because that is a mouthful so early, not eligible to serve as senior key personnel on proposals. Our principal investigators will need to certify that they are not a member of MFTRPs in both their biosketch and their current and pending documents. So in Science CV, they'll be able to set up delegates like you do now to have those documents completed, but the principal investigator, the faculty member, will have to do the certifying. Additionally, the AOR certifies that all individuals identified as senior key personnel have been made aware and have complied with that requirement of not being involved in a MFTRP. The other change is that for BioSketch and current impendings, we'll be using the common forms. So these are forms that were created with NSF in collaboration with NIH. And they're a set of forms to be used broadly by federal sponsors, but NSF is going to be the first one to mandate the use of them. What they do is create a common set of information that should be requested in your current impending and BioSketch. So a couple of things changed with this. As of May 20th, there will be no page limit for the BioSketch, and synergistic activities have been removed as a requirement to be included in the BioSketch and are now going to be included as a one-page document as a separate upload. As I mentioned, both forms require the principal investigator, the senior key person, to certify through the system. The other update with the NSF PAP guide that is going to be a big change for our community, and I've spoken at ROC about this change because it's something that we're really trying to get awareness out about early, is that the postdoc mentoring plan has now been changed to the mentoring plan, and it's expanded to include graduate student involvement. So the PI, your principal investigator, will have to include this mentoring plan if they have any postdocs or graduate students proposed on their project. They have to include updates on this mentoring plan annually and at final reporting time. And for substantial support, which NSF considers to be 1 person month or more in the prior reporting period, those individuals are required to have an individual development plan. So that means the principal investigator is working with these individuals to create a specific plan for their development, and that's something that the principal investigator has to certify that they are doing annually. This will be a requirement for supplemental requests that didn't include postdocs or graduate students initially. If you are then proposing them in a later stage, this plan, the mentoring plan is required, and if the substantial support is reached, those individual development plans will also be needed. There's a new requirement to seek and obtain tribal nation approval for proposals that impact tribal resources or interests. So eligibility to receive an award that impacts tribal resources and interests will be directly affected by the inclusion of this document at proposal stage. There's a checkbox on the cover page that will be added so that if the proposal does impact tribal nation resources or interests, that has to be selected, and then the plan is included, or the documentation of approval that the tribal nation has given to the principal investigator for the work being done on the project needs to be included as an upload. That examples of activities I think are important because they're very broad. References to a tribal nation in materials, public forums, or publications requires this additional approval from the tribal nation. Carrying out studies or research on tribal nation reservations, territory, and other locations where they have legally protected rights to resources is another scenario in which this would be required, and using tribal nation-controlled information or data in research.
Marissa, before you move forward on that, does that apply equally to only federal recognized tribes, or would it apply to state tribes, tribes that are only recognized in the state?
I will double check, but I believe it's federal and state. I believe it's all tribes, yeah. But I'll double check. That's a great question. Oh, yes. Thank you. It is. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So actually, this slide has a typo. This is effective May 20th, 2024. All right, so just digging into the common disclosure forms for the BioSketch and current and pending documents. The forms also require individuals to disclose contracts associated with participation in programs sponsored by foreign governments, instrumentalities, or entities, including foreign government-sponsored talent recruitment programs. So if an individual receives direct or indirect support from one of those organizations, that support has to be disclosed. They also have to report any foreign government-sponsored or affiliated activities, and as I mentioned before, are prohibited from being a party in a malign foreign talent recruitment program. These slides will be sent out after, and this link here goes directly to the forums on the NSF website. They're hosting them as being one of the major contributors. So here's the certification, just to give you all a sense of what it'll look like if you haven't seen it already. So in addition to certifying that the information provided is current, accurate, and complete, it also has them certify that they are not a party of a malign foreign talent recruitment program. All right, yes, yes.
And I really had questions about trying to understand if this applies to them. Which office?
You can send them to sponsor program, Sparks. I mean, you can do SPS and we can work with them.
I'm going to talk about that in my update. Okay. Specifically around the foreign talent recruitment programs, you can direct them directly to me.
Yeah, but if it's about the requirements, we're happy just to talk through that with them. And I saw Holly, yeah.
My question is about this program. Would it also be a COI report? Meaning they should put it on their COI?
It should, I mean, yes, I would think it would also be on the NOI.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to take a little bit on that. So yes, we are working with Salome Pia and the COI team are currently working on revising the NOI forms and the COI forms and to make sure that we're capturing these requirements. The system policy related to conflicts of interest was just changed in January. So now there is going to be a requirement to report all external professional activities, for pay or not. So that's going to be a major change for our faculty that they need to understand, but it is specifically designed to make sure that they report these types of requirements that will then have to go on the current pending. So we are actually seeking a feedback focus group from different groups, one being the users, so the faculty who have to fill out the forms, or others who have to fill out the forms. We all have to do the disclosure. The second is administrators, department heads, associate deans, who might have to review them. And the third group is you guys. It's those people that have reporting requirements because you need to verify what's been submitted in a proposal. We want to make sure that you can get the information to compare out of the COI module. So those are the three groups. If you're interested in providing that feedback, I encourage you to reach directly out to Sloane or reach out to me and I'll make sure you can. So we're recruiting that group right now.
Thank you. No, I'm glad that that's just the best part about having everyone in the same room. All right, so we just finished up a working group semi-recently on the subaward process. So this group had members from the college research offices, from sponsored programs, from contracts and grants, and we really just wanted to kind of provide updated guidance and resources on the subaward process. So we have updated guidance on our website as a result of the work of this working group, and I'm going to invite Kevin Schroeder to come and review those resources for everyone.
Thanks, Marissa, and good morning, everybody. So I'm going to just take you all through some of these new resources that we have available on the research.ncsu.edu website, if I'm able to. I don't know what's happened now. Here we go. Yeah, it's coming up. Okay, great. Perfect. Yeah, so as Marissa mentioned, we've added a bunch of new resources to the research.ncsu.edu website about the updated subawards process. Hopefully, a lot of this will be review. But basically, to start out, the reason that NC State issues a subaward is when we have another organization that we're partnering with that's going to carry out a portion of the work of the project, specifically where the recipient PI is responsible for programmatic elements of that project. That sometimes might include the subrecipient PI being named as a co-investigator on the prime award itself, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And the purpose of the subaward is to flow down the prime requirements from that prime award to our subrecipient to ensure that their policies, facilities, et cetera, are in compliance with the federal award and that they're adequate and compliant to perform the work under the prime. So the process for setting up a subaward, if this is working, starts in the pre-award stage. I don't know if I'm able to click this. Maybe not. Let's see if I navigate back to the PowerPoint. At pre-award, here we go. So the CRO and the PI are going to work together when the proposal for the prime award is at proposal stage to put together the subrecipient award package or proposal package that includes several things. The FDP checklist, and we'll jump over to that first. This is a document that some of you may be familiar with that we use as kind of a quick reference guide to determine whether or not the entity that NC State is passing some of the work under the project to should be considered a subrecipient or a contractor under uniform guidance. The reason that matters is because if they're just a contractor based on uniform guidance, then the terms and conditions of the prime award don't actually have to flow down to them in the same way. So they may not be subject to some of those requirements of the prime award. They're still performing work under the award, but they're not a subrecipient under that award. Some of the factors that go into that consideration, a subrecipient will, I don't know how well you can see this, but they'll determine who is eligible to receive federal assistance. They may have their performance measured in relation to whether objectives of a federal program were met. This is one of the biggest ones that I think is usually the easiest way to try to determine. They have responsibility for programmatic decision-making under the project itself. So essentially, the question is the substance of what they're doing central to the funded research itself, or is it something that maybe is more ancillary or kind of in the course of their regular course of business to provide a service or a good? And that's down here in the contractor section. Provides the goods and services within normal business operations, provides similar goods or services to many different purchasers, normally operates in a competitive environment, et cetera. A good example that I've heard in the past is if you imagine that we're sub-awarding to McDonald's, if we are hiring them to provide 500 cheeseburgers, they're probably a contractor. If we're hiring them to help develop a new baking method for a bun, they're probably a subrecipient. So it's kind of gets to the core of what type of work are they doing and how substantively related it is to the federal award. Some other pieces of that pre-award proposal package, a letter of intent signed by the subrecipient's authorized official, of course, a statement of work, itemized budget, budget justification, a lot of the same things that would go into our proposal package to a prime award anyway. All of that, as I mentioned, gets put in, if it's available and if we know that we're going to be subawarding to this subrecipient, that gets put into the PINS record at the stage of proposal for the prime award. So the way that all gets routed, here's a description here on the website. You can add a subrecipient named in the proposal to PINS using the Sponsors Subs Deadlines tab. If they're not if that entity is not already in the system, then we can add a new subrecipient by clicking a Request on New Subrecipient button and entering in some basic information about the entity. Uploading the proposal package in PINS, reviewing the SFI question, which is listed here. Do you have a significant financial conflict of interest with the sponsor of this project or a proposed subrecipient, subcontractor, vendor, or consultant? So, of course, there are COI concerns not only coming from who we're receiving funding from, but also who we are passing funding to as a part of the project. And so once all of that is entered into the record, obviously we're moving forward then with awarding the prime award itself, and then the process picks back up at post-award stage. So once the prime award is complete, awarded in red, and processed in the system, at that point then we would expect the CRO and PI to work together to put in a PMR request for the subaward itself. So that's going to come through to our office. Basically, the prime award account has to be set up before that can come through to our office. And then once that arrives at Sparks, here's some description, background on how to actually request the subaward action using the PMR system. And once that comes through to Sparks, then we are going to actually issue the subaward or the subaward modification if it's a subaward that was already in place. Before we do that, we conduct a risk assessment on all new subawards coming in, or all new subawards that are going out from NC State. So we review the entity to ensure that under the guidelines set out in uniform guidance, we're evaluating their risk of noncompliance for the federal statutes or federal regulations involved in the project or other requirements. For consistency and ease of process, we conduct risk assessments on all subrecipients, whether or not the funding is coming from a federal award. So it's only necessarily required for federal awards, but we conduct risk assessments on all of our subawardees. We do that by reviewing the entity and the PI in visual compliance. So basically running a check across multiple systems using a service called visual compliance to make sure that they're not popping up on any lists that would prevent them from performing the work. We check their SAM.gov report for their responsibility and qualification record to make sure everything is normal as expected. And then we either receive a questionnaire from them if their information is not in the FTP clearinghouse, or if it is, we can access the information on the FTP clearinghouse to conduct a full risk assessment to basically make a level determination of whether we would consider them low, medium, or high risk. If an entity does come back as medium or high risk, then Sparks is going to communicate with the department, with the PI, about some recommended mitigations that we can take, the terms that we can add to the subaward to try to counterbalance the risk involved. And that's going to be kind of a case-by-case determination because the reason for the risk may be different from one case to another. So we're reviewing the most recent audit that's been provided by the entity and determining if there are any deficiencies or material weaknesses that are reported, if there are any findings in the research and development cluster from the audit that would cause us to maybe say, maybe we should be receiving invoices more frequently from the subrecipient. Maybe we should be requiring more documentation from them. Maybe we should have a shorter period of performance for incremental funding on our outgoing subaward. But ultimately, we will then take all that information, put it into the subaward itself, send the subaward for execution, and once it is fully awarded, then we are completing the subaward action in red, uploading all the documentation to the PMR and approving the PMR request and tying it off. Afterwards, the sub-reward monitoring ongoing through the course of the project happens at the department level. So the department is receiving the invoices. The department is responsible for retaining documentation pertaining to the subaward for a minimum of 3 years following the completion of the project, or longer if required by the terms in the prime award. But of course, Sparks is available for any questions and support that might come up with bits and pieces in that process as well. But yeah, so all of this, as I mentioned, is laid out on these websites that are available at research.ncsu.edu. I don't remember who it was that mentioned it, but I always also just Google NCSU and then whatever word I'm looking for, and it usually takes me to whatever I'm trying to find. So I assume this is going to be one of the first things that comes up if you look for NCSU subawards. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
My question is about where it says the College Research Office retains documentation. If we get the documentation into red, do red do place it to retain it, or are we retain it ourselves on top of the systematic?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what the specifics are of how those documents end up being retained. Does anybody know the answer to that question? Yeah. So the answer there was if the College Research Office can get it into red, it would be then retained in red. And that's probably best practice, but not sure if we have a system where that's being done consistently. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. As was mentioned before, we had a big old hole left in our team when Anne retired, and we've done our best to piece things back together. And fortunately, are getting some more help in the door, hopefully very soon as well. So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate everyone's patience with our team as we've had to piece things back together and taking sometimes a little bit longer than I'm sure Anne used to on some of the subawards processes. But we're doing our best, and thanks to everyone. Absolutely. Anything else? All right, great. Thanks, y'all. I'll pop back over to the PowerPoint.
In the interest of time, I'm actually going to say for our subcommittee updates, which I think we had a couple of our subcommittee chairs here, we would like to do those over email moving forward. And the libraries also had an update for us on data management and sharing plans. They have a data management plan tool that they would love for this group to not only use, but also make sure their faculty are aware of the use. And I'm going to share that in email as well so that you all get the full spiel. And they did provide us a slide, and we're going to do an update today. But we're going to put a couple of those through email so we can get to some of our in-person hot topics. So we're going to segue into hot topics, which is kind of a new agenda item for the RSC. But we are also going to use these hot topics in a later training from our research education and training team. We're going to use hot topics and this kind of concept of hot topics coming down the pipeline for a soft skill that we will be learning about change management. So I'm going to start by asking, I believe Marissa will be our first one to give some brief hot topics, which are just brief, something coming down the pipeline, something you should be aware of, but we might not know the final end state of it at this time. And then we'll ask Mary, and then Mary's is going to move into our research education and training team, our training series, part of the program. So Marissa first.
Y'all are going to be so tired of hearing me speak by the end of this. All right, so this one actually came out of a request from an RSC exec meeting where there had been a conversation about the uniform guidance revisions coming down the pike. So while this final uniform guidance has not been published yet, we just wanted to kind of touch on some of the high points. That to be said, we won't be changing policy or talking policy updates until the final guidance is known. So, but just to give a heads up, because I know this is on some of your radars in the community, some of the major changes include an increase in the threshold used to define capital expenditures from $5,000 to $10,000. An increase to the MTDC inclusion threshold of subawards from $25,000 to $50,000. So that amount that FNA would apply. An increase to the de minimis indirect cost rate percentage from 10% to 15%, and the allowing of administrative closeout costs up to the due date of final reports. So again, not yet final, and once that final guidance is published, more to come. But since we had questions on that, I felt like it was probably a good idea to address more broadly. The last topic I have is the NIH updated policy guidance for subaward and consortium agreements. So NIH-funded foreign subawards will now include a provision requiring the foreign subrecipient to provide access to copies of all lab notebooks, all data, and all documentation that supports the research outcomes in their annual progress reports, or RPPRs. They have to provide access to that information to the primary recipient, so if we are the pass-through entity, to NC State, with a frequency of no less than once per year in alignment with those RPPR submissions. Such access may be entirely electronic. We've worked with the libraries and OIT and compliance. I'm just going to show you this briefly. We have a web page, so if you're interested in learning more, it includes the policy overview, the NIH expectations, for which I just summarized, NC State's recommendation for facilitating the transfer of and storage of the data and documentation. So we are recommending the use of Globus, which OIT can support your use of, and then the information being stored in research storage. The research facilitation service out of the libraries has been a really great resource for us in creating this guidance, and would also be a wonderful resource for the community in executing this guidance. Pre-award considerations to make sure that if a foreign subrecipient is proposed, that the management, sharing, and storage of that foreign subrecipient's data is included in our data management and sharing plan, and that we are requiring additional language in the foreign subrecipient's LOIs addressing this requirement, so setting the expectation early on that this additional administrative burden will be present. We have if you click that, not right now, it will take you to an LOI that has that language, so you can just download and use that. Post-award considerations, it's the PI's responsibility to ensure that all progress reports and backup data are uploaded to research storage or otherwise collected, maintained, and stored, so that it can be provided to NIH upon request. And then the AOR will, we recommend, this is our recommendation, is that at RPPR submission, if you have a foreign subrecipient on an award, that you're obtaining confirmation from your principal investigators that they have access to all the information they need to verify the information in the RPPR. So that's a really brief overview, but I did just want to, okay. Just want to let you know that we have that website. Again, these slides will go out, so we have the website here, the actual NIH guidance, and the language in their grant policy statement. We only have about we have one award that's affected by this right now with one foreign subrecipient, so this isn't a huge consideration in the community, but I just want everyone to be aware of it. And I've already covered these topics. Okay, so Mary, thank you.
All right, so the hot topic that we've touched on a couple of different times now is really related to research security, to include why the NIH is now requiring more data from foreign subrecipients and why the biosketches and current and pending have changed. So my goal today is to kind of highlight for you some of the federal action, some of which we're still trying to get a sense of how the federal sponsors are going to be implementing this, so that you can advise your faculty better. And even if that advice is, let's contact the Director of Research Compliance to meet with you. So first of all, I want to be clear that this is not just the Department of Defense or NIH. All of the federal agencies, because of NSPM 33, the National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, if you have heard me talk, I've probably mentioned it multiple times. That in 2020, was the federal government's strategy for research security across the federally funded research portfolio. It affects every agency that sponsors research, and really in the last 4 years now, the federal government, all of the agencies are implementing various aspects of NSPM 33 and the additional requirements that have been layered on by Congress, specifically the security requirements within the CHIPS and Science Act. The Department of Defense, not surprisingly, is one of the first to kind of publish their policy on risk as it relates to fundamental research. Department of Energy has also taken some action, including the issuance of their interim COI policy that's very much aligned with the NIH PHS policy. So we are seeing some convergence and consistency across the federal agencies, but implementation is still a work in progress. NSF, as Marissa has mentioned, is kind of the agency because they are probably the largest, well, they are the largest sponsor of federally funded research, has taken a lead role, especially in the common disclosures and the common forms, current and pending, et cetera. But they have also established a new analytics capacity. So basically what they're doing is they're proactively identifying conflicts that might present risk to the research. So it's not just what our investigators are disclosing or the institution is disclosing, it's also what they're finding in the public record. So that's an important point when you're talking to your faculty for them to understand. And then certainly NIH, but besides implementing eventually the common disclosure forms, I want to highlight a new implementation and for their NIH SBIRs and STTRs. So if you're familiar with those programs, they are issued to small businesses, but universities are often the subrecipient to that small business. And the prime recipient, that small business, will have to disclose their foreign ties, but it potentially could apply to their subrecipients as well. So you may get a request, if we're a subrecipient under an SBIR, STTR, to fill out a foreign disclosure form. Those can come to our office for assistance. So the bottom line is this applies across the federal agency to all federally funded research, including fundamental research. I would say probably prior to 2018, research security was really focused very much on controlled research in the DoD, DOE space, applied research space. But now the federal government is obviously broadly concerned about the misappropriation of federally funded research. So it is applied broadly, but as is often the case within the federal government, it's not applied consistently through the implementation process. So various sponsors are implementing in various ways. As I mentioned, Congress got involved with the issuance of certain research security provisions within the CHIPS and Science Act, and I really want to highlight two in particular. One prohibition is for covered individuals. That's what NSF probably refers to as senior personnel. NIH might refer to it as key personnel, but that's now a common defined term, the people who are involved substantially in the conduct, design, and implementation of research. There is a prohibition of covered individuals from participating in malign foreign talent programs. Marissa's mentioned that term before. I'm going to get into a definition in a minute. And the proposing institution does not have a policy addressing participation in malign foreign talent programs. I mentioned previously that the System Office just recently changed the COI policy at the System Office. We will also be changing our COI regulation here at NC State, and it will include a specific prohibition about malign foreign talent programs to allow our faculty to not have to worry about that. Marissa mentioned some definitions. I want to highlight that the common disclosure forms are focused on really three different types of appointments: academic appointments, professional appointments, institutional appointments. I'm not going to read this slide, but I did highlight a couple of things. They need to be conveyed in a formal manner. I will often hear faculty say, well, we kind of talked about it and it's sort of an adjunct. No. If it wasn't conveyed in a formal manner through an appointment letter or a contract or something, it's not a formal appointment and shouldn't be on their bio sketch. But if it has been, then it should be. And again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to focus too much on those, but they are in the slides. The main countries of concern, not surprisingly, right now, and this can change, the Department of State can add or remove countries, but the main countries of concern are China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Entities of concern are those those entities on U.S. government restricted party lists. I would also say some of the federal agencies are considering any entities associated with countries of concern to be suspect, so keep that in mind. Kevin mentioned that in our subaward process, they're screening and using the tool Visual Compliance. Fortunately, Visual Compliance is our screening tool to help us identify entities of concern. So that's baked into the process. So what is a foreign talent recruitment program? Well, this is the definition that is in the CHIPS and Science Act. An organization or an effort organized, managed, funded by a foreign government or a foreign government instrumentality to recruit science and technology professionals and students, regardless of citizenship, national origin, or part-time or full-time status. Just participating in a foreign talent recruitment program is not the problem. It's does it meet the definition of a malign foreign talent recruitment program? Now, the actual definition of malign foreign talent recruitment program is about a page and a half. So just to parse it out, the top concern is it's a talent recruitment program associated with a country of concern. China, Iran, Russia, North Korea. Not many talent recruitment programs from North Korea, but who knows? So that's the first barrier. If you've got a faculty member who is considering participating in a recruitment program with any of those countries, I would encourage them to come talk to me. I will talk to them about the risk. If it doesn't meet the definition of malign, it may be okay, but I will tell you that as I said, the U.S. government is very concerned about any entities associated with those countries. But the malign talent recruitment programs includes any of the following requirements. Again, keep in mind the research security concern is about the misappropriation of federally funded research. So it's not surprising that they're concerned about unauthorized transfer of intellectual property or the requirement to establish a lab in a foreign country and conduct research there, potentially redirecting federally funded dollars for that purpose. So I'm not going to go into the details here, but be familiar with some of the things that could trigger the definition of malign. One that they're very concerned about in particular is the recruitment of new researchers or trainees into the talent recruitment program. So what do they require? Really, if they're participating in a foreign government recruitment program, as Marissa said, it's got to be disclosed. It has to be on their biosketch. It needs to be disclosed. That's regardless of the country, right? If they're participating in an EU-sponsored recruitment program, they need to disclose that. If it meets the definition of malign, then they're prohibited from participating in federal funded research if they're participating in one of those. As Marissa mentioned, all of our investigators will have to attest at proposal time that they are not participating in a malign foreign talent recruitment program and annually thereafter in their annual report. So we know that the DoD has implemented this process. We also know that the DOE has, so Department of Defense, Department of Energy, both have implemented this process, but we expect all of the federal agencies to implement a similar award review process, okay? Proposal is submitted. The agency is going to do a technical merit review to determine if it's worthy of funding. Once it is determined that they want to fund it for technical merit, it's going to go into a security review. And with Department of Defense, that's two different groups. The program manager or the study committee will review the technical merits, and then it will go over to a security board, and they will review it for foreign influence. If they determine that's high risk, and I'm going to highlight some of the ways that high risk might be identified, they will come back to the university and they will say, this is high risk, we need a risk mitigation plan, it's required. Tell us here are the risks that we've seen, how are you going to mitigate those risks? We will then submit that plan to the agency. They will review it and decide whether we've done a good enough job or not. They're supposed to kind of give us a back and forth if we haven't fully addressed it. We have at least a couple of situations where they have simply said, nope, that's not good enough. So again, work in progress. So we want to make sure that we highlight this for our faculty who might get caught up in this loop. If it's accepted, we will negotiate the award. Our risk mitigation plan will be included in those terms of that award, and then we will perform in accordance with the terms as well as that plan. If it's not accepted, it will not be funded. So it's really important for our faculty to understand what might trigger them to be identified as high risk. Any questions on this? We have seen the Department of Defense implement this process. We have also seen the Department of Energy implement a more informal process, but similar, and we expect the other agencies to do it as well. Their determination of what is high risk might be higher or lower, depending on the research, but it will consistently follow this process. So, what are potential indicators that might trigger this review? And I want to pause here and just say, just because somebody is caught up in this process does not mean they're suspect. It just means that something in their record has given them an indication of a red flag, okay? It could be they've co-authored with individuals from a entity of concern or a country of concern, or they're, they've received funding from said entity, if you will. So it doesn't necessarily mean they've done anything wrong. It just means that the federal government believes that they are potentially more at risk. So certainly, if they determine any participation or indicators of participation in a malign foreign talent recruitment program, and keep in mind, it could be 4 years ago before people were even thinking about malign foreign talent recruitment programs or recruitment programs. And so that's in the public record, and that might trigger that review. Hopefully, they've severed that relationship, and it's not ongoing, but that could be a trigger or an indicator of high risk. Indicators that the covered individual, and keep in mind, covered individual in this context is senior personnel, so your investigators, co-Is, senior personnel, is currently receiving funding from a foreign government or from foreign country of concern, or a foreign country of concern connected entity, or that they have filed patents in foreign countries or foreign jurisdictions from work that resulted from federally funded research. And then this bottom bullet, indicators of association with entities of concern. And unfortunately, we're still calibrating what those indicators might be, and each federal agency is interpreting that slightly differently. So keep that in mind. It could be a co-authorship that might trigger that indication. Maybe they wrote a paper. Maybe they had a postdoc here at NC State. That postdoc left, went to China and took up a position at an entity of concern, and they publish a paper after that. That could be an indicator. So again, it doesn't mean that these people have done anything wrong. It just means that the federal government wants us to do an additional amount of due diligence. The federal government is looking at their biosketches disclosures, their current and pending disclosures, any identified collaborators within the proposal, because that's often a component of the proposal, as well as their publication history, right? Because that publication history is also in the public domain. I will also, I want to just point out, just because somebody graduated from an entity of concern should not be a sufficient enough association. So if you graduated from, say, Harbin Institute of Technology in China, it's actually one of the premier technology universities in China. So we have a lot of researchers in the US that may potentially have graduated from there. Just having graduated from an entity of concern should not be a sufficient enough association to trigger the review. But if they accepted a adjunct faculty position, or they've co-authored with others from there, that might trigger that review. So what do you need to do if you see these things? What I would say is direct your investigator to me. We're trying to calibrate across NC State a common response. We have a template for a risk mitigation plan that we're calibrating every time we're engaging with the federal government to make sure that it's addressing their concerns. And most importantly, in my mind, we want to make sure we're right-sizing the controls, that we're not taking fundamental research and making it controlled research because of the mitigations that we're recommending. So that takes some nuance, and that's why I've held that at my level so that I can work with the faculty and the federal government to make sure we hit the right note there. So if you see it or they have any questions about malign foreign talent recruitment programs or how the federal government is reacting to these things, please direct them my way. With that, I'm going to pause. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Kyle, I'm not going to advance to the next slide because I think you have your, yeah. So thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to move this water here. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. Give you guys a little breather because you've heard quite a lot this morning, and these are some heavy topics. They're things to think about, and that's what we designed our RA training series around today, is thinking through two particular issues. So if you would, all together, grab the manila envelope on your table, at least one person from the team. David, don't fight with people over it. All right. And so in that envelope, you're going to have two sheets of paper. And to get started, we're going to want to start with the one that has the NC State logo here at the top of the page. And so working with both Marissa and Mary, yes, you do not have one. All right, give me, oh, here we go. Justo is going to give you one. Excellent. All right, so on this sheet, we're going to have two activities today, and both of them focus around what Mary and Marissa presented. So our first activity, our table work activity as we're calling it, is going to be built around the ideas of communicating process change to faculty as we deal with implementing common disclosure form requirements. All right? For those of you online, there will be a link in the chat. So go ahead and you'll want to open that up prior to being sent out to breakout rooms. So what we would like you to do is we would like you to discuss the topics. There's some prompts there listed, some things to think through. And we just want you as colleagues to think about how your departments and your colleges could address the challenges with implementing these new, in this particular case, common disclosure forms, as it appears these are rolling out to our agencies across the board. And so everybody's going to be touched, and everybody, as Mary said, is going to have to respond in a way that's calibrated to the type of research that your professors are doing. So what processes need to change? How would you communicate those changes to your faculty, especially faculty who get all of the information together for a proposal and then allow you to compile it while they are traveling? With the requirement for certification by the faculty now at the end of the process, specifically thinking of the NSF process in Science CV, the professors are going to have to certify that at the end. And so what Marissa helped me understand is we often like to have them certify it, make some edits, and then I think re-upload it. Yeah, it's not going to work now with the new process in Science CV. It's going to have all the edits done, it be certified, and then move forward with the process of submitting it. So how would you change processes in that particular case to handle that? What about creating deadlines, enforcing deadlines? You all are the RA professionals. What can you do? What can't you do? And how would it work in your particular college and department? And so we invite you to discuss this array of issues with each other. And then when we come back, if one or two tables or those online from breakout rooms would like to share, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are as you start thinking through the process. All right? So go ahead. You'll have 4 minutes, 4 whole minutes to do this. You ready? All right, everybody go. All right, let's bring our discussions to a close. I know the time is quite limited to discuss such difficult topics as how to get our colleagues to follow timelines. I know that's a challenge, but in our discussions, what topics did you center on? Like, what were the factors that you focused on, and how would you see this sort of rolling out in your departments or college? Would any of the tables like to share? Yeah.
Here, I have a mic so the people online can hear it.
Hi, I'd like to say good morning. So the couple things we realized is this is huge because right now with NSF, once any agency, but NSF, once they create their application, share it to us, they don't have to do anything. So this will be a big change to that. So our biggest thought is it has to get communicated broadly and by the right groups. So the university, URC needs to have this as a topic in a couple meetings. I think ORI needs to have an email that we can then forward on to give guidance, sort of like we talked it today. And then internally, we were talking that we have to change our timelines, and we have to come up with a process to ensure that we can get their sign off. And what exactly that will look like is the other question, right? Does it mean that they can't share it to us till they sign? So the semantics is really important that we have to dig into before we change it.
Excellent. Thank you. Amy, did we have any breakout rooms that wanted to share? Or any other tables you're welcome to share? We just wanted to extend the opportunity to the rest of our colleagues. All right. Laura, it looks like there's one breakout room, at least. Yep.
So Saloni wrote it from their breakout room with Science CV. You want to delegate and proxy authority or have other authorized users.
Okay. Anybody else want to share into the discussion? Okay. Excellent. So our next activity is a little bit more specific, but maybe a little bit more challenging. I don't know that it will take as long, but in your folder, you have a second sheet of paper that provides you a bio sketch of just a potential scenario. For those of you online, that potential scenario has been included at the bottom of the task sheet. Did you want to add first? Yes. All right. Let's advance to the next slide. There we go. Excellent. So the question here is, what are the indicators of high risk? What indicators of high risk do you see in the biosketch? And we're presenting this just because we know this is going to be a new process, and it's just something to start thinking through. And so we may not have all the answers as a community today, but we want to start thinking about it and start thinking about how we look at biosketches. And then when you do see those risk factors, who should you contact? Or would you contact research compliance about those specific factors? So as tables take, we'll give you 4 minutes to do this. I don't see you necessarily needing all 4 minutes, but we'll go ahead and give that to you. We were just discussing whether or not we're necessarily handing the task at this point. The conversation we're hearing, that's what we love to hear, because you all are here together, working together, meeting each other, talking, and we love that. That's why we want to do it in person, to bring folks together and to see us face to face. It's great. Like I saw Petia earlier. I didn't have a chance to stop, but she and I worked through, I think, email or on Zoom chat like 6 months ago about something. And so now it's great to put, a real face to a real person. So with our phase 2 of the exercise here, what are the notes, the points in your bio sketches that stick out? Hold on. We can hold on. Yep.
We had Professor Cherry, and so Professor Cherry is a PhD from Prague, an adjunct faculty position there, but Professor Cherry wants to request to host a visitor from the Russian Academy of Sciences, and also has co-authored a paper with a colleague from the same institution. So we have an entity of risk, we have a country, and so we are compliant to the type of a plan to mitigate risks and see if we can even move forward at all.
Russia being a country of concern, and Russian additive sciences and an indicated concern. Did anybody else have Professor Cherry?
Yes.
Did anybody else have Professor Cherry? Okay. Did you guys come up with a different answer? Same, consistent? Great. Thank you. And anybody else have high risk? Anybody else think they might have high risk, but then based on our wonderful presentation decided to really want to check this? Okay, who had a postdoc? Did anybody have a postdoc?
Over here to the left, right?
Okay, why did you guys determine postdoc was effective?
Here, just so the people online can hear.
Thank you, Laura and Mary. We determined he was a high risk because he has a fellowship supported by the Chinese Scholarship Council.
Right.
And also he received a summer research internship in Brussels, Belgium. And even though this is not a country of concern, we just didn't know if the funding that was coming for the fellowship was associated with some high, yes.
So certainly, you want to consider all foreign sources of funding. Chinese Scholarship Council to date has not been identified as a government recruitment program, but certainly it might be a yellow flag. But the main reason, why do you think the main reason why he doesn't present a high indicator of risk?
It's, well, he has a master's degree from an institute of technology that is an entity of concern.
Okay.
But just a master's degree, you mentioned that it might be just a...
True, and typically your postdocs, what are you going to say?
They typically are not PIs or co-PIs.
Right, so typically a postdoc is not going to be senior personnel on a proposal. So you're probably not going to submit a bio sketch for that person. But that person retains some of those relationships, so I'm happy to have a conversation with them to help calibrate them.
And absolutely, I advise Jean to definitely contact you.
We actually had the online group had this scenario, and this is just the quick feedback that the two Chinese organizations mentioned. They did come off as two main indicators of high risk from a national security perspective, since it's not exactly something with the clear, since it's not clear what the funding is going towards. So that would warrant contacting research compliance.
Absolutely. And I'll just take a general question. What sponsors do you think are more likely to see high-risk concerns? Federal agencies, just throw them. Department of Defense, certainly. Who else? Department of Energy. Those two are probably the highest. But that doesn't mean the other ones won't, but their risk threshold might be a little bit more flexible. Well, I will tell you plant sciences is a key concern for the federal government. Certainly they're worried about intellectual property related to plant sciences, so that might be a non-traditional sponsor, USDA sponsor that money. We haven't seen a lot from USDA yet, but again, all of the agencies will eventually have to implement that, so we could see some indicators. And I would also just say, does anybody have any other questions or comments related to the biographies? I just want to emphasize what I said earlier. Just because somebody graduated from a specific university or just because they come from that particular country does not automatically make them suspect. And here at NC State, we value all of our faculty, all of our researchers. And so when you engage with me, I'm trying to help them get the funding and help them and indicate to the sponsors that we understand that we take our responsibilities very seriously, but we trust our faculty. And I will. So any other comments, questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe they're yeah. Yeah, so excellent question. We didn't talk about it, but the research security programs, because we are an R1 institution, we have a required research security program. And one of the elements of that is foreign travel reporting, disclosure of prior approval. So if they're federally funded and they're traveling abroad, we believe they will have to disclose that. So right now, the first thing I would say is if they're traveling as an NC State person, they need to do a travel authorization. And in that travel authorization, we have some questions. And it may trigger, certainly if it's one of the countries of concern, it'll trigger a note to the export control team, and they will work with the faculty to make sure we address any export control compliance issues or any research security issues. If they're traveling and it's reimbursed or sponsored by an external professional activity, again, we're in the process of modifying our NOI, COI forms to call that out, so they'll have an ability to disclose that there. I would say if they are attending a conference, if it's an internationally recognized conference, I wouldn't discourage them from doing that. If they're presenting at a conference in a country of concern, I would encourage them to come talk to me, because what I will try to do is level set the risk to them, and then they can decide, okay, I'm only going to be funded by NSF and maybe okay, or no, I really, DOD is a big part of my portfolio, I may need to reconsider. So I'm trying to level set that. Where is the conference for you on that one? Iran. So what is unique about Iran? My export control folks can't say anything until I give them the okay. Does anybody know what's the difference with Iran? Okay, Kristen. David.
No.
Yes, no, David. What is different about Iran?
You want 2,500 years of Mesopotamia?
The one thing that would trigger a different analysis.
Do everything else, because it's an entity of interest. It's a comprehensively sanctioned country, which is clearly what I meant.
It's a comprehensively sanctioned country, so actually attending a conference in Iran will require a license. So that was an Easter egg I hid in there for the Export Control Office. So when you contact me on that one, I'll direct you to Kristen. Not David yet. No. Clearly.
I have a question, ma'am. If we're relying on travel authorizations, when are people supposed to actually put out the travel authorizations? Speaking as a person that checks them, and the number of the one that I said, well, I went last week, and that's the answer I wanted. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're going to have to do is communicate out to our federally funded researchers that they need to do those proactively, not after the fact. That will be a part of the communication strategy, certainly. So thank you guys for engaging. Hopefully you enjoyed the exercise. One more thing.
So with the travel, if they're not traveling on the federal dollars, it still matters because they're federally funded?
So we don't know yet.
Okay.
So the research security program standards were published in draft form last summer. So we have a good indicator of what will be required, but they got a lot of feedback from the community. And so we expect there will be some modifications to the final standards when they are published. Once they are published, NC State will have a year to put a research security program in place that's consistent with the final standards. And in that year, we will certainly be communicating out to the community. That will be a future hot topic, I promise you.
This is the last thing, and this is really for you, Mary, is the very general, what do the college or departments need to be prepared to provide you when they come to you with a question or concern?
As much detail as you can get me. What made you think about it as a risk? Was it a question? If you know the researcher's portfolio, let me know. But basically bring them to me with the questions with as much detail as you have. And I may ask follow-on questions. And I want to get better at going back to the colleges after I've worked with that faculty. I've tried to do that with the College of Engineering in particular because, as you can imagine, they've been the first kind of dealing with this. So we don't always know in the central office exactly how you guys are organized. So if you need to pull somebody else in from the department, for example, because that's how your college is structured, don't hesitate to do that.
Thank you, everyone. And turning it over to Missy.
Thank you, Kyle. And thank you to Laura and team for handling all of the logistics for this meeting. Our next full meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 14th, and we'll return to a virtual format. Hope to see you there. On your way out, please grab more coffee, snacks, and the new members, don't forget to stop by the registration desk for your gift. Thank you all.